Hi, everyone. Welcome to Building a Better Breakfast with Community Eligibility, hosted by the Food Research and Action Center. I'm Steve Hayward, Communications Manager at FRAC. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few brief housekeeping items. We expect this webinar to run about 60 minutes. We are recording the presentation and will send the recording and slides in a follow-up email. Closed captioning is available. To turn captions on, select Show Captions in the bottom taskbar. At the end of the presentation, there will be time for questions and answers. To ask a question, please use the Q&A tab. Sorry, my dog. With that, I'll pass it up to Erin Heisem, Senior Child Nutrition Policy Analyst at FRAC.
Thanks, Steve. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Food Research and Action Center's webinar, Building a Better Breakfast with Community Eligibility. My name is Erin Heisem. I am a Senior Child Nutrition Policy Analyst with FRAC, and I am so excited to be here today to learn from school food service professionals from across the country on how they are pairing the Community Eligibility Provision with breakfast after the bell models to increase students' access to this vital morning meal. So let's get started. We have a lot of expertise on today's agenda. I will provide a brief overview of recent breakfast participation data, innovative breakfast service models, and the community eligibility provision. And I am joined today by four fantastic school food service professionals. First up, we'll hear from Caitlin Lazarski from Newburgh Enlarged School District in New York. Next, Chon Walters will share his CEP and breakfast story in Kansas City Public Schools in Missouri. And finally, we will learn how Betty Crocker and Josie Perez have utilized innovative breakfast models and the community eligibility provision to increase participation in the Redlands Unified School District in California. Lastly, I will share some FRAC resources and we'll wrap up with a Q&A session. As my colleague Steve just mentioned, please utilize the Q&A function on the bottom of your taskbar on your Zoom screen to submit questions at any time throughout this webinar. Next slide, please. The school breakfast program remains underutilized. Just over half of the children who ate school lunch during the 2021-2022 school year also ate breakfast. Just this week, FRAC released our annual large school district report. The 2023 report looks at survey findings from 91 large school districts in 40 states and the District of Columbia, examining participation in operations in April 2022, when federal waivers allowing schools to offer all students meals at no charge were widely available, to this past October, when the majority of schools returned to the tiered eligibility system of free, reduced price, and paid. The report reveals that average daily participation in school breakfast decreased by more than 100,000 students across all surveyed districts, from 1.84 million children participating in breakfast on an average day in April to 1.74 million participating this past October. Next slide, please. The traditional school breakfast program, where students are charged for a breakfast that is served before school starts and in the cafeteria, misses far too many children and creates unnecessary obstacles to participation. Charging for breakfast, battling bus schedules, requiring an early arrival, forcing breakfast eaters to consume meals away from their peers, not having adequate staff to serve meals or monitor cafeterias, menu fatigue, and limited support from partners and administrators can all create barriers to school breakfast participation. Next slide, please. But we know that offering breakfast to all students at no charge and moving service out of the cafeteria and into the classroom combats many of these barriers. Making school breakfast a part of a school's culture ends stigma, increases participation, supports operations, and sets students up for academic success. Next slide, please. There are three main ways schools serve breakfast after the bell: breakfast in the classroom, from a grab-and-go kiosk, or offering students a second chance to select a breakfast after the school day has already begun. I will leave the details on how these models operate for our panel experts. Next slide, please. And the gold standard, the best of best practices for school breakfast, is pairing innovative models with free school breakfast. Offering breakfast to all children at no charge optimizes the impact of switching to an innovative breakfast model. Next slide, please. There are a variety of ways that schools and districts are offering breakfast to all students at no charge through local non-pricing initiatives, state legislation supporting free school breakfast or healthy school meals for all policies, and through the special provisions of the National School Lunch Act. Today, we are going to specifically focus on the community eligibility provision. For as you may know, tomorrow, Friday, June 30th, is the deadline for schools to elect to participate in community eligibility for next school year. So let's discuss how community eligibility works. CEP allows high poverty schools to provide breakfast and lunch to all students at no charge. Schools are determined eligible to participate in CEP, and they are reimbursed based on the percentage of enrolled students who are directly certified for free school meals through participation in another means-tested program, such as SNAP, TANF, FDPIR, and in some states, Medicaid. This proportion is referred to as the identified student percentage. Any school, group of schools, or district can elect CEP if at least 40% or more of its enrollment is directly certified for free meals without an application. Reimbursement is determined by multiplying the identified student percentage by 1.6. This product determines the percentage of meals reimbursed at the federal free rate, with the remaining meals reimbursed at the federal paid rate. Next slide, please. So how does CEP affect school food service administration and operations? To start, no fees are collected from students, since every student is offered school meals at no charge. This eliminates having to collect, process, and verify school meals applications. Schools no longer claim meals by eligibility category, and staff will no longer have to deny a student a meal due to insufficient funds. Plus, CEP puts an end to school meal debt. And as we've heard through multiple reports, school meal debt created a significant burden to school districts this past school year. Next slide, please. Community eligibility participation has grown over the last near decade. Nearly 7,000 more schools implemented CEP this past school year, bringing the total number of schools adopting community eligibility to over 40,000. Over 80% of eligible schools are participating, reaching more than 19 million students each school day. And we expect even more schools will adopt CEP for next school year. Now, I am excited to turn it over to our panel of experts. First up, Caitlin Lazarski, Food Service Director of Newburgh Enlarged School District in New York State.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am super excited to be here. Our breakfast program is hands down the thing that I am most proud of in our district, and we do, I think, a lot of great things. But our breakfast after the bell programs have been kind of the what really launched us forward and really kind of put us on the map. It's what we hang our hat on. So I'm really happy to be here and speaking about it. So basically today, I'm just going to talk about like how we started up the program, what we did to make it successful. And a lot of it was just the front end work of it. So we've been doing this since 2015 was our first year that we took breakfast out of the traditional cafeteria models and moved them to different styles based on grade level. Next slide. So again, in school year 15-16, we were awarded a substantial grant for infrastructure from the American Association for School Superintendents and the Walmart Foundation. So the point of this grant was twofold. It was to provide the supports that we needed for infrastructure to make breakfast more accessible to our students, and to then be role models for and tell our story and make sure that other districts had someone to tap and say, hey, how are you doing this? Can you help us? And that has been what we've been doing since we initiated this grant. So our goals were to provide universal free breakfast to all students, move breakfast out of the cafeteria to allow for that increased access, and increase our participation. So our participation in the breakfast program in the 14-15 school year was 34.1%. And to back that up, we were at 72% free and reduced rate before we were community eligible. So now we are community eligible, and obviously, so we feed all of our kids at no cost. But prior to the implementation of breakfast after the bell, even though we had a high poverty rate, we were only reaching about 34% of our kids. So our goal was to increase to 75%. We're still not quite there, but we are always working towards it. And then we were also able to provide and track data on student attendance, tardiness, morning nurse visits, academic performance, and success stories and feedback to help other districts. Next slide. So the first year that we were not completely community eligible, we only had 8 buildings that we certified under the community eligibility provision, and the others we decided that we would make a no-cost model to breakfast. So we were picking up the cost of those breakfasts and still providing it for free. In the other buildings, they still had to pay for lunch at that point in time. And then we implemented district-wide community eligibility in the 16-17 school year. We decided to go with breakfast in the classroom for our pre-K through 5 grade levels. Our middle schools have grab and go stations. And then we have reimbursable vending and continuous breakfast service in our high school levels. So how did we do it? We built support from the top down. I was the new director here in 14-15. My superintendent at the time was also new here. So he was kind of getting his feet on the ground and trying to figure out what his priorities were. And I just, met with him and I said, listen, I think this is an issue and we should be doing better here. And he heard me, but he had a whole bunch of other things going on. So I just kept sending him emails, and this is what breakfast does for kids. Look at the results out of Schenectady, and look at our neighboring district that's doing this. We should pursue this. No, really, I had no more interaction with him. I was assuming he was reading them. And then all of a sudden over Christmas break that year, he said, we're going to do this. Look at this grant. And we went all in. So I was fortunate at the time to have that superintendent's blessing, but you just need to build that support network wherever you can get it. So whether it's a board member that's passionate or a building administrator that's passionate, get them, talk to them about how we're missing an opportunity by not bringing breakfast to where kids are. And by doing that, I provided him with the current data for what breakfast ADP was compared to lunch, our free reduced percentages by school. And again, all of those articles, all of those things that we could do to support what other districts are doing. Like this, we should do this. This is easy. This isn't reinventing the wheel. And then if you have people who are still hesitant, encourage them to visit a local school district that's providing alternative breakfast models. And then if you need the funding, secure it. There's lots of opportunities to expand your breakfast programs. They are always available. Next slide, please. We also did some work with engaging the local stakeholders. So we had building level meetings at each of my 14 buildings with the assistant principals and principals, head custodians, teachers union delegate, and cafeteria manager. In a lot of cases, the nurses participated as well. This way, everyone had a voice. We said, this is the model we're looking at. What's your feedback on it? Now, I went in thinking, this is how I want to do it. I want grab and go for our middle schools. I want breakfast in the classroom for pre-K through 5. And in one of my school buildings, the principal was like, listen, we have 4 floors. I have 1 custodian. The elevator sometimes doesn't work. We're going to have an issue with this. So can we do a different model? So I did have to listen and be flexible and adjust for that building's needs. So it's good to go in with a proposal and a thought on how, because you're the expert on how it can be done, but listening to the feedback from the actual building administrators to say, hey, maybe we can negotiate here and we can do it a different way, just so that we can get that breakfast into the kids' hands. We also did teacher in-services and training for teachers and support staff. And again, this is a brand new thing. And so we heard both the good and the bad in those. We had teachers who were saying, you know what, I am constantly buying snacks for my kids. I'm constantly, stocking a pantry because I know my kids are hungry during the day. And then you had the teachers who were like, oh, it's going to make a mess. This is going to cause pests. It's going to be a nightmare in the morning. But the majority of our teachers were very supportive. So we were very lucky. And again, I think that's because we built that top-down support. And then letters to teachers, available resources, and a contact person. That was super important too. So we made sure that their voices were heard. If you have an issue, if there's a problem, this is who you can contact. Let us know what your feedback is. Let us know what we can do better. And just having that open communication really helped to get them on board with the program. Next. We built excitement. We did website announcements, press releases, parent newsletters. We did sampling with our students so that we could get some feedback on what type of breakfast items we were going to be sending to the classrooms. And then we always celebrate National School Breakfast Week. And what happened? Participation went up in all the buildings. Yay. The greatest increases were the pre-K through 5 traditional breakfast in the classroom. And breakfast meals went up by over 2,700 meals a day. And overall breakfast reimbursement went up, and that was at the lower rate at the time, right? By approximately $1 million. So I also say that breakfast did save my program. When I came in, prior to me, the department was losing money. And we initiated this breakfast. We had the labor. We had labor because we had 2 lines in every school open for the handful of kids that were coming to breakfast. We had the labor there because the cooks were there, the managers were there. It was infrastructure that we needed, but the labor was there, and the food cost is covered in the reimbursement. So our reimbursement totals went up over $1 million just that first year, just by moving breakfast out of the classroom. Or into the classroom. So it really did save our program financially at the time as well. Next. And then we've done some cool things since then. We've introduced a breakfast cafe for our high school students with fresh milk lattes. We do hot chocolate bars, fresh baked muffins, yogurt parfaits, smoothies. We do just a really kind of upscale Starbucks-esque model. So it's still a fully reimbursable breakfast, but it's something that's more upscale and unique to our high school students. Next. Second chance breakfast. So we were still working on our middle school. It's something that I still work on. That's the biggest gap is our middle school and high school students. So getting advisory groups together. We settled on Smoothie Fridays. Those are still very successful in the middle school level. During the winter, we do the hot chocolates in the middle school level as well. They really love those yogurt parfaits. And then we gave them some additional options that the elementary school students didn't have. Next. And this was just some sample feedback from families. My children have been able to get more sleep now that they have breakfast and lunch at school. We're saving money, our family's saving money, and that's greatly appreciated. It's taken a lot of pressure off of me to send them to school with money. Now I have money for gas. So this really does impact your families and their budgets. Next. And there's my contact information. So again, I'm super proud of our breakfast program. I love what we do. I'm happy to host tours. I'm happy to talk to anybody about what types of things they think might be beneficial to their programs. If you have questions on equipment needs or staffing, I am willing to be that resource for you. I'm super excited about breakfast and happy to help anybody who's just getting it started.
Thank you, Caitlin, so much for all that information and offering all of your help. Next, we have up Chon Walters, the Director of Food Services in Kansas City Public Schools. Take it away.
Yep. Hello, everyone. How you all doing? Just give, like you say, some information about myself. My name is Chon Walters, and I am the Director of Child Nutrition Services for Kansas City Public Schools. We have 36 schools in our school district, where we also service charter schools in our area with our food service program, as well as a couple of colleges that have kids doing dual credit enrollment and things of that nature. I just want to give thanks to Erin and her team for inviting me out to do this, because I'm very excited about CEP and feeding students as well as everybody on this call. So I'm gonna talk to you guys today about considering CEP and breakfast in the classroom, or grab and go, if that's something that you feel that your school can benefit from, which I believe it could. So you can go to the next slide, please. So first, when you talk about breakfast in the classroom and grab and go, I'm gonna go over a few things you can take in consideration. All right, it'll be less movement throughout the school. One thing that I noticed, like when we started breakfast in the classroom back in 2018, of course, just like the previous person, Ms. Caitlin, who just spoke, we had to get the buy-in from the school. And we went in and we got the buy-in and whatnot, and we kind of went through the benefits of doing this. So like I said, less movement throughout the school. One thing we know with teachers, they like their time. And sometimes being in the cafeteria is not how they want to spend their day. And if they would spend their day with kids, they want to spend it with their kids that they teach on a daily basis. So this was the way of doing that, because the students went right to their classroom. Another thing that you're gonna sound like a broken record, because there's a lot of good points that Caitlin made, and I'm gonna make the same. Collaborating with other operational departments. It was one of the things where I talked with custodial, I talked with maintenance, I talked with all the, even building administration, of all the things that we would need from them to make sure that this was a good fit for them. And also, letting them know that, hey, the benefits of what it's going to do and how it's going to improve everything from behavioral issues to all that. One thing I always say to schools is, it's multiple models out there. So I always tell people, hey, talk to neighboring schools around you who are doing this. Go out, take time, use a little resources, go do a visit, look at the models they're doing. It's one of those things I always tell people, do not reinvent the wheel when you think about grab and go, and when you think about breakfast in the classroom, and whatever model you think may work for you. Also, when it comes to materials you may need, you may see something that another site is using, and you may be like, nah, we wouldn't do things that way, and that's okay. Like I say, while you don't want to reinvent the wheel, it's still not cookie cutter. Just like Ms. Caitlin said, hey, she had to talk with one of her school administrators about, hey, this one worked for us because of elevator situations. So it's one of the things where we, as the child nutrition department of your site or whatever, you got to be flexible, and you have to be a partner with them, and not try to just cram things down their throat per se, but make sure that they are in agreement with what you guys are doing. Because when you have somebody who you partner with, then they're more likely to take ownership when things don't work right. I think one thing the COVID years have all taught us is to pivot. So it's been many a time in some of my schools that we pivoted, and I'll walk through those things here in a little bit. So you can go to the next slide. So, benefits of grab and go, it's DESE approved. It counts as instructional time. One thing that I would hear all the time is that, hey, we won't have enough time to do all our instructional things that we need to do. But hey, DESE already said this is approved time. So there's one less thing they have to worry about. So while they're taking attendance, while they're playing, playing music, getting the kids organized, that all counts as instructional time. So that's not anything that they would need to worry about. The next thing is, hey, students they score higher in math and subsidized testing, right? Because they're coming in, they're going to their safe space of where they're recognized and where they're going, and they get to get relaxed and enjoy a meal with a friend. Students demonstrate better school attendance and less tardiness. One thing I see in my district is talking to parents. They talked about how their student would be like, hey, mom, you got to hurry up, or dad, you got to hurry up and get me to class, because if you don't, then I'll miss breakfast. Now, it's one of the things we did have second chance breakfast as well, but they really enjoy eating their meal in the class with their friends and with their other students as well. So it kind of helped us out in that area. Schools exhibit improved alertness, concentration, and memory. Again, it's one of the things where it's one less thing they got to worry about. They don't have to go to the cafeteria, they go right to their homeroom, and then they get ready to start their day. And then, of course, like I said, fewer behavioral issues in the morning. Like we said, a lot of things can happen with students from day to day, and it's always good to start their day off great. And most of the time when they're interacting with people who they do on a normal basis, hey, just call for less interaction with things of that nature. So next slide. So now I'm gonna go over the processes that we use at Kansas City Public Schools. And the first one I want to talk to you about is grab and go. Anytime I'm suggesting models to any school who haven't done it before, I do suggest grab and go, and I'm gonna go through those things here as well. But if you see from the picture, you can see it there. You know, the kids come in and maybe a kiosk there and stuff of that nature. You have all the product lined up. And one thing I know about our cafe managers, they train the students very well on what to take in the morning. All right. They got to take at least 3 items, one being fruit. So it's one of the things they know that. So, you know, one thing administrators would think, hey, this process will take too long. I'm like, no, the kids know what they're going to get. They know how to grab it, and they will get through the process. One thing I always say to administrators when we're going through that first or second, third day, maybe, is that they still have to get used to this. So the first and second day may be a little rough, but from there it smooths out and it goes seamlessly. From as the students select their meal, we have one of our staff, cafe staff members there, and they either use a strike sheet, which we got approved through the state, or a kiosk. We use the strike sheet for ours. From there, they then go to the classroom with the meal, and then they participate and eat their meal. Now, one thing that I know people had concerns about, well, how would these kids be able to carry all this stuff to the classroom? And I'm letting you know, from bigger kids to smaller kids, they get it to the classroom. One thing we did do with the smaller kids, we did provide like a little boat for them to put the items in, but most of them are able to grab the items that they want, take them to the classroom, no problem. Then after that, they will discard the trash, and then they'll go on with class. So you can go to the next slide here. So one thing is very important when we're thinking about doing this, though, is the logistics of it. So again, you have to make sure everybody's doing their part. And this is the benefit to me of doing grab and go over BIC, even though BIC can work for you as well, just depending on what your sites want to do. But it's one of the things where with a grab and go station, you know, it's all on the cafe staff. And me personally, I like to try to keep a lot of stuff off of other departments and put the burden on us to make sure that things are running correctly. So with the grab and go station, you know, cafeteria staff are the ones who set it up. Then from there, you know, the students come in, they choose their meals, what they would like, you know, and then they go to the classroom from there. And then the cafe staff is also the one who was recording that cell at that time. So that way it's still in our control. After breakfast is over with, the grab and go station is broken down by the cafe staff. So they do that. And then while we're talking about the classroom, in the classrooms, we normally have cleaning supplies that are provided by our custodial department, who we partner and collaborate with. And if they have any spills or anything like that, they can clean those up, no problem. And one thing I know that was always the question when we talk about trash and things like that in the classroom, people was always like, well, the kids are going to spill, they're going to make mistakes. And yes, some will make mistakes, but I can truly say it has not been a plethora of them that happened during my time doing BIC. So it's one of the things where the students, and one thing I do know about students, they do not like their area to be messy. So they will make sure they take care of their area if that's the case, if people think that. But you can go to the next slide there. So now I'm going to talk about the BIC process, kind of how we did it. And I just want you guys to see kind of the extra steps that are in there. So of course, you know, same thing like with grab and go. The kids come in, you know, but at this point, breakfast will be delivered to the classroom. All right. So it's multiple ways that this happened. The model that we use at Kansas City Public Schools, we use the wagon that had 4 insulated bags in it. And, you know, we had one with the fruit, with the entree, the milk and the juice, things of that nature. So we kind of had it separate out. From there, that wagon was dropped off at the classroom. Then it went to the recording part. So when it comes to recording the participation, that is where we needed the collaboration with the teachers. And it's one of those things where I can say from our experience, you know, we gave it to the teachers, they did it, but then what ended up happening, it kind of threw our program off a little bit, was the COVID years. So it was like when we came back from that, we realized that a lot of teachers just didn't want to have that interaction and move around the whole touching things and stuff like that. And that's kind of how we switched everything over to grab and go. But then I'll tell you about that later. But from there, the students, you know, they eat their meal and whatnot, then they throw it away, the trash and whatnot. And then again, the wagon is returned to the cafeteria. And usually what we did was there, we had like a student ambassador. And it was a student who, displayed great, behavioral and things like that, was a good student. And they got a reward of being able to go and deliver the wagon back to the lovely cafeteria staff. But kind of like I was mentioning before, when we came out of COVID, that's when, we all the cross touching of things and things of that nature. And that's kind of how we flipped all the way to grab and go, even at the elementaries. And we realized it worked great. We did BIC at elementary. And like Caitlin was saying, at secondary, did grab and go. But once we converted to grab and go due to COVID concerns, we realized like, oh, these young kids, they are just as smart as the older ones, and they can grab their meal and go to their class too, which they did. And we realized in that process, we were able to eliminate certain people from that process to make it less cumbersome. So it took pressure off of the teachers because they didn't have to strike. And also teachers would have to ensure that the students took a compliant meal, and it took that pressure away as well, because when they came in the classroom, they already had the items in their hand and just needed to eat and discard of the trash. So you can go to the next slide. So, and this is just like a sample timeline of something that we did there. And like, it kind of goes through what I was talking about. So in the morning, the breakfast carts will be delivered to the classroom. And we did this a few different ways with partnering with different schools. Like I said, it varied by school. Some schools had the staff, some people didn't. Some schools had before and after school care personnel that can help, some didn't. But in some situations with the cafeteria staff that took the wagons to the classroom, other cases, it was the before and after school staff or the teacher even. Even some teachers, when they would come in, the cafeteria was right out the front door, they would just grab their wagon and take it onto the class with them. From there, teachers would make sure students got a compliant meal. And then they would have to make sure they strike those kids as they took their meal. Then from there, again, the wagon would go back down to the, trash would be discarded, then the wagon would be sent back to the cafeteria. But kind of like you saw on those two models, we took steps out with the grab and go, where teachers had little or no responsibility other than having a good day, and they didn't have to strike and anything of that nature. And then that took the pressure off of them and put the pressure back on us, which I didn't mind. And it's one of the things where we knew we had accurate numbers from the jump there. So you go to the next slide. So again, cleaning protocols. So definitely it's going to be one of those things you're going to have to partner with your custodial department and make sure, they have the extra cleaning supplies to give to the classroom and things of that nature. And it's one of the things too, where even though, I know they had their own budget and things of that nature, seeing that this was something that I wanted to have in our schools, I took it upon myself, like, hey, I can use some of my budget dollars to make sure you guys have the supplies too, because I can trace it all back to BIC for things that we needed for that to justify the spending of all those things of that nature. Another thing to think about too is trash receptacles. So seeing that it will be more trash and stuff like that, and you have things like food and milk and things of that nature, you want to make sure you get rid of that trash in a timely manner. So one of the things too, talking about with the custodian staff, seeing that they were not in the cafeteria in the morning cleaning up tables and things of that nature, or having to clean up messes, now I just kind of switched their duties to going around the classroom and just collecting trash that way. One thing we did at our schools was put a few of the bigger trash receptacles in the hallway. That way a student could even take the trash from the class and place it in that receptacle. And then the only thing the custodian had to do was grab those barrels and just wheel them away pretty much. So it's one of the things where they liked it because it was less work on them, and pretty much they felt like somebody was partnering with them to keep the buildings clean. So it was a win-win for everybody there. So you go to the next slide. Yeah, and other information I think that is important for you all to know is the start of breakfast time. And when I say the start of breakfast time, we traditionally know when our breakfast times are, but seeing that you're going to be transporting things and doing things in the classroom now, it will kind of change things up a little bit. Because while you will need to make sure breakfast in the classroom or grab and go if it's operating effectively, you still need to make sure you are prepping and getting ready for lunch as well. So it's one of the things where the benefits I saw from grab and go and from BIC, with BIC, we had to clean the bags out. We had to restock the bag for the next day and things of that nature. Well, with grab and go, you can truly use, your numbers from the day before or previous day to know, like, hey, this is about how many students that are eating. And just like Caitlin was saying, hey, my participation went up, so a majority of them was eating the food. But seeing that we like to give our kids like 2 to 3 options, so we just had to kind of balance between the days of which one they would like better than the others. But it was one of the things, the cleanup was seamless on the grab and go, because you're just breaking down, you're taking down empty trays for the most part. But with BIC, you did have to kind of take account of what came back and things of that nature. So it kind of took a little bit more time. So that start time to breakfast is very important to get. Another thing that I would suggest everyone who's thinking about doing this does as well is getting on the calendars of your principals, PD days with the staff. It's very important that whether you're doing grab and go or BIC, that they understand what right look like, and that even though we're doing something different, we still have federal guidelines that we have to follow, and that they understand their part in making sure we're running a compliant program. Next is the secretary, making sure the enrollment is updated on a weekly basis, especially if you're doing BIC. You're going to need an up-to-date roster so they can check those students off. But if, like I know with us, we with students moving around so much in my district, we were approved to use strike sheets, but we still did the rosters to keep them honest and make sure we had a righteous number going on for there. But definitely make sure you're collaborating with the secretary. And then last is just a support team to assist with return. Definitely try to make sure that you let them know that, hey, it's okay to let students help with this, and they will not just run over the building and things of that nature. They'll bring it right back and go back. So it's one of the things where that was some concerns people had with the BIC of having students in the hallway and whatnot. But with grab and go, that was one thing that it took away. That's why, again, when I think of these models, I love both of them. But when I switched to grab and go, I really saw benefits from everything on down from the counts that I was receiving to any issues with anything else like that. But again, BIC and grab and go was a great model that we used here. And I hope that you guys consider that as well as CEP, because our job is to make sure kids are fed. And this was a great way that my district was able to do that while raising participation. So thank you for your time, and I hope you guys consider CEP.
Thank you, Chon, so much. That was excellent and super informative. And I love getting the students involved and giving them some responsibilities. Finally, we will go all the way over to California and hear from Betty Crocker and Josie Perez from Redlands Unified School District. Take it away, ladies.
Erin, thank you so much. Wow, Chon and Caitlin, you set the bar high. I hope to get a little delivery here. We have Josie, our nutrition specialist, with us as well. Next slide, please. Slide on through. I always like to give people a perspective. Redlands Unified School District, we are a suburb of Los Angeles in San Bernardino County, halfway between Ontario Airport and Palm Springs. We are in declining enrollment, about 20,000 kiddos. I have 25 schools. We are in our third year of 100% CEP. Like many school districts, I cover more than one city. Redlands, Loma Linda, Mentone, Forest Falls, and parts of San Bernardino and Highland. Next slide, please. Coming from California at a national audience, I also wanted to share with you, we are so fortunate. We have the California Universal Meals, or AB 130, as a support in addition to the CEP. So we're going to show you how we use both of those in this universe of Redlands. Next slide, please. As Erin had previously shared, the model of serving breakfast before school simply has significant amount of barriers. And what we have done, next slide, please, is instead of looking at the barriers, we look at all of the positive outcomes when it comes to our Breakfast After the Bell program. And there are many, as Chon shared. The biggest one is the increase, Caitlin shared, increase in breakfast participation. And then Chon was also sharing an increase in attendance and a decrease in tardies. Next slide, please. And that's off 105 principals, sir. Can you roll this beautiful video from my principals?
So I think that breakfast break relates to whole child teaching, just because once again, like, we need basic needs met first. And so we used to struggle with having those needs met, but now that we have this opportunity for breakfast break, it eliminates that, because kids can come and have breakfast in the morning, and then if they're still hungry during recess, they can enjoy breakfast break. And now it just allows us to have a fed child who is capable of learning because those basic needs have been met.
Hi, I am Dr. Stephanie Locke, the principal at Cope Middle School. Feedback I've received from staff is that they love it. They think this is, again, a great opportunity for students to get the food that they need so that they can be successful in the classroom. One of the other things we've thought about is related to the Redlands 2025 vision, specifically the area of equity. We have students coming from a wide variety of homes where they may or may not have breakfast in the morning, and having the second chance really helps limit that gap and provide an equitable opportunity for all students to get the breakfast and the food that they need so that they can be successful in the classroom.
I open the car doors every morning for parents. So they say, you know what, my kid hasn't, eaten yet, Dr. Cost. I said, don't worry, we'll get them to breakfast. And so the parents are like, thank you so very much. They're very appreciative. Many didn't know that this opportunity existed. So as we've started to share this with our community, people are getting, excited about it. And they just know that their kids are truly taken care of when they're here at school. Prior to breakfast break, we had kids who'd be like, oh, I'm hungry, I can't concentrate. Now with a full stomach, they're able to be more productive, get their assignments done, not be worried about when is lunch because now they're full from eating again at breakfast time. And so it does cut down on the discipline in class and just the fidgetiness because they're fed.
The breakfast break helps provide a welcoming environment to our students. They know that we're going to take care of them. They can come to school and their needs will be met.
Thank you. So a little bit of pre-planning for our breakfast carts. We started in school year 2019-20 through No Kid Hungry grants where we bought our carts. We started out with about 4 and then we grew that a little more in school year 21-22 where we began our rollout. The big thing there, adding on to what Caitlin and Chon shared, is that collaboration top-down approach. We call it the principal buy-in. We talked to them about the benefits. We did site walks with them where we went through their campuses and figured out where was the best place to put carts. We did perform traffic flow studies, and then we showed them potential menu items, and we collaborated with principals, with custodians, and with site staff to see what made sense for their site. And our full launch for the breakfast carts happened in school year 22-23, where we had it at all 24 of our school sites. Next slide. All right, here we have a picture of 3 different cart styles. Again, we started, you got to use what you have. In this case, we had 2-sided carts, 1-sided carts, and we kind of just figured out what was best for each school site, via an elementary school versus a middle and high school. Next slide. So breakfast cart menu. I'm the nutrition specialist here at Redlands Unified, so I live the menu. We took a team approach in our menu development. We worked with our field specialists, site teams to determine best food options. We call it getting eyeballs on the situation when we put food out and we evaluate how the kids are eating it. Are they liking it? What are the issues? Things that we put on our breakfast cart was individually wrapped, ready to eat items. What was an interesting one that we did that we were kind of surprised about, we didn't start with cereal because there was a big concern that at the high school level that there's too much spillage. You have that milk all over the place. But then we found out when we put the cereal on the carts was kids actually want to eat it dry. And we were kind of surprised that was their version of their breakfast. They just did not get the milk. They got their fruit and another item, and hey, it was breakfast. Along with that, we also found that we did not put food items that required syrup or dips because that was a little harder with grab and go. And just finding items that handled well on the go. Next slide. As the registered dietitian, I always have to put something on special diets here. So with our special meal kiddos, SMPs that we call, at elementary, we have a setup pickup location with our special diets. I know that's a big concern. So we do that before the school year starts. We put a partnership with the student and say, hey, let's collaborate and pick the perfect place. Same goes for our middle and high school carts as well. Next slide.
Okay, so launching the culture, Betty, right back at you. Thank you, Josie. This is the really big deal right here. So as soon as you have the buy-in and you're ready to launch, we do what we call a front-loaded approach. And so literally we clear our office and we cleared our central kitchen as we began to launch our district-wide approach to the breakfast break. And here's a fabulous picture from Moore Middle School. This is just us using our team to help the students, show them how to line up. I mean, just like simple things to make sure that the students have success, the early success. Next slide, please. And so then we work with our natural landscape. So we're working to develop the sustainability. Just like you saw in the other picture, this is us putting together how we line up students. We actually do a job walk with this. You can see there's nothing in the carts right here. This was our live job walk. So what we do is we use the natural barriers of a simple thing as a bench seat so that the line flows a little bit easier. The brick wall, so the line flows a little bit easier. Next slide, please. So let's look a little bit deeper into the elementary school service. So the elementary school service, we focus on the very first breakfast. The elementary schools are much different than the secondaries because the cart has to move with the students, where our kinders take their first recess is different than the other grades. By and large, that's a tradition at many of our campuses. So we go into the deep dive with our principals, working with the principal team so that we can follow the kiddos. And this is something that is continually changing as our partnerships are evolving. And the factors that influence the service model, quite frankly, is the location to enhance the participation. Next slide, please. So here is our secondary service. Our middle schools ended up being our toughest opportunity to expand the breakfast break because we had limited minutes, yet all 4 of our principals got together and they gave us an extra 2 minutes. So now we have 7 minutes of passing period and we do the grab and go fashion. Our team is out there before the serve and the kids know exactly where everything is. And it's just like Chon was sharing, is that the kids know how to pick out their breakfast. Next slide, please.
All right, it's back at me. Definitely adding on to what Caitlin and Chon said, you need a wow factor at times to get kids to come through the line, especially at middle school and high school. And our wow factor was that our Operation Smoothie. We brought freshly hand-drawn smoothies at our what we call our breakfast break, and this helped increase our participation. It tripled it, and it was also a new thing that we found that was amazing was it actually brought a team building to our high school culture. They had never done smoothies, and to do hand pulled smoothies, it was like, hey, this is kind of cool, and it just brought new excitement into our kitchen. Next slide. And just here's a picture of the machine, and then also just the layout on smoothie day. It's a busy day that morning, and the kids come out. We get really much higher participation on those days we do smoothies. Next slide.
So similar to what Caitlin shared, there was a significant increase in participation. And here is our data. What I did is I took a 3-year spread as we began 1920 data. And of course, we know what happened in the middle of 20s. We got COVID. So I cobbled together this year with our 18-19 data, reflecting April, May, and June. So we have a clean year as our baseline. Looking at our baseline, we spent 21-22 school year beginning to launch the breakfast break. And at the end of the school year, we were at 100% district-wide. This is our first school year that we're closing with 100% district-wide participation with CEP and with the breakfast break. You can see under the increase column, the first year increase was 95%. This very last year, without looking at the June data, because we're still in that month, we closed out at an increase of 123%. I just did the quick math on that. That's about $2 million increase in our revenue. And then the most important thing to us is the percent participation. How many of our kiddos, right? We're a declining district when it comes to enrollment. Our enrollment is declining, yet look at the percentage of our kiddos that we're able to reach for breakfast went from 16% the first year to 43% this year. And I wanted to close with this beautiful video from our graduation. Our school nutrition professional is highlighted by our student at the graduation ceremony. It's quite humbling. You can roll it.
The influencer in my life is Miss Michelle, one of our school's lunch ladies. You might not recognize her by name, but you definitely saw her every time you walked past the food carts on North Campus. And I can't remember a single time when I was running late to class in the morning, and she didn't stop to ask me if I was hungry. And I always was, but like I said, Mrs. Sanders' first period was dangerous. Miss Michelle showered all of us with the same level of care and compassion that we owe each other. More than just keeping us fed, she inspires us to treat every single person we come across in life with an equal level of kindness and respect. It's those like her that remind us to look out for those around us, because in the world we live in today, sticking together and uplifting others is more important than ever before.
Nobody could ever predict the impact that breakfast break would have on our valedictorian at Redlands High School. It's very humbling to witness firsthand what the impact is to our kiddos. And Erin, thanks for including us in this conversation.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Betty and Josie. I have to say, watching that video and listening to that student, that's what we're talking about, right?
Amen.
CEP, community eligibility, offering breakfast and innovative models, it increases the access for students so that it increases equity and it levels the playing field. So no one has to feel that stigma and that everyone can have the nutrition that they need to thrive. So thank you to all of our presenters. That was really beautiful, beautiful way to wrap that up. Next slide, please. As you know, FRAC has a variety of research and resources that are available to schools, districts, advocates, partners on both breakfast and community eligibility. Next slide, please. Our breakfast website contains a variety of tips and tools that can help increase participation in the program. The research we mentioned in the beginning of this webinar is linked in the chat and housed on the sites, as well as numerous resources on the benefits of school breakfast, expansion strategies, reimbursements, operating the programs in specific areas or with specific populations, such as rural communities. Next slide, please. And likewise, our CEP website also houses a variety of tools and resources on community eligibility adoption and expansion. We have the CEP database where you can search for eligible and participating schools nationwide, grouping tools and financial calculators that districts can use when adopting CEP, and our most recent community eligibility report, the Key to Hunger-Free Schools. Next slide, please. We're going to open this up to questions now. I'm going to kick it off to our panelists. There was a few questions that came in regarding breakfast in the classroom and teacher point of service and compliance. So one of the first questions is, for those sites doing breakfast in the classroom, are the teachers providing student numbers or a roster accounting for which student received the breakfast, or are those sites using checkoff sheets? And maybe if there's been a change since before you did community eligibility to after, you can talk about that as well. Caitlin, I'll pass it to you first, and then we'll go down to Chon and Betty.
So I would definitely check on what your state requires. So I'm in New York. We've been reviewed since 2015, I think 2 or maybe 3 times since we've had this breakfast program in place. So this is acceptable for us, although there are there are ways that it does get difficult. So I'll explain that. So we just provide the bags. Everything is unitized for us. So we get a lot of backlash on the usage of bags, plastic bags. So I know that that's one of the things that we still struggle with, but we unitize breakfast. So we have the fruit serving and the 2 grain or a grain and a protein all together. So that's not on the teacher's task. We have unitized. Only thing a teacher has to do is make sure the kids don't pull it apart. They just take a whole breakfast. We have a form that we use. Again, that's been vetted by our state ed. So we'll send maybe 20 breakfasts to a classroom of 28. And just because they're, not every kid is there. And they just can take it. We have a sheet. It says the number of meals provided. The next line that the teacher is supposed to fill out is the number of meals, given. And then we get the sheet back, and the person who's unpacking the breakfast does that second count to make sure that number is accurate. So number of items returned, and then the claim number is the number that were actually served. So that works for us. We do not do rosters. Before we were CEP, we were checking because we had to claim free, reduced, and paid, but we no longer have to do that under CEP. So that works for us. The biggest struggle we have with compliance with the teachers is they want to take the extras. If there's not, if those kids are absent, they want to take them and just put them to the side because they don't eat them. They send them home with the kids because they're like, oh, but they're still hungry. And I get it. And I appreciate the fact that they want to keep their kids fed and happy, but that's the part that we have to constantly train on, that, one meal per student per day, and they have to be present to get it.
Yeah, kind of like what Caitlin said, yeah, especially with that compliance piece, that's the biggest part that we had struggles with as well. But going back to the original question of rosters, or do you ever use all those in our district, and kind of like what Caitlin was saying, definitely talk to your state rep and see what they say. With DESE here with us, we talked to them, and we went through a couple of different things. At one point we were using rosters, but then when we were using rosters, what ended up happening? Well, this kid changed class. Well, now that kid's over here, and the teacher is writing at the bottom of the sheet, oh, this kid is here. So we saw that was an issue. So when we went to DESE with that and talked to our rep, we asked, hey, is it okay if we use a strike sheet and just strike off the students as they come through? And they approved the strike sheet that we came up with. And then we put all the DESE logos and all that on to make it look official. And then they were fine with that. So that is kind of how we do things now. And because at one point we were looking at POS systems, but to kind of mobile POS, but then that was kind of outside the scope of what we were trying to do. So once they said that strike sheets were fine, we just made that our SOP for that. And then again, going back to even with the BIC concerns, that's why when we just fully switched to grab and go, where the onus was on our people to strike, we had no issues with extra meals being taken or anything like that, because our people were right there to validate and make sure things were right, if that makes sense.
And on our breakfast break model, that is not served in the classroom. So we're not doing the rosters. It's a more of a traditional serve, 100% CEP. We use the clicking system.
Great, thank you so much. So we have another question that came in. Does anyone offer breakfast before school and then a second chance breakfast afterwards or at recess? And so how do you efficiently track students to ensure they're only getting one meal?
Would you like me to tee that up?
Please.
Yeah. So at Redlands, what we did is, again, we tend to use what I call a team-based approach. And on our team are the principals, our PIO, the district resources, everything. It's not just the child nutrition services team. So what we did was we start off with our press release, informing all of the families that the kiddos have access to one free healthy breakfast, one no-cost lunch. And then what we do is we also push that out via the opening year announcements by the principals and put it out multiple times throughout the year. At all of the points of service, we also have the student pledge on there of one breakfast per student. And so what we do is we simply enforce that with all of our signage. And then Should a kiddo come in for the second time, we just reinforce the message by saying, hey, kiddo, thanks a lot for choosing to have breakfast with us. So each day you get to choose to have breakfast either before school or at the breakfast break. And that multiple layer, multiple approach perspective is how we make sure that all of the kiddos have access to one free, no cost breakfast.
Yeah, I know what that's that was a concern of ours as well, because we did have kids coming to the before care part. They were like, well, can they eat now? And technically, no, we didn't have the systems in place to secure that wasn't happening. So they had to wait till they went to the classroom. So that's kind of how we handled it here at our district. Yeah, even though those kids may come in sooner, we would make them wait to eat in classroom. However, if there was a kid that was really hungry, fruits and vegetables we can get settled all day, we would provide a kid with a fruit or something like that if he was just really hungry. But most of the time, the kid just wanted what they wanted at the time. And most of them had no problem waiting until they had to eat in the classroom. But that's a valid question, because that was one concern that was brought up here with us as well. And what we did, we just provided a fruit to them in the meantime if they wanted that, to hold them over.
Great, thank you. Caitlin, do you have anything to add?
Just the only place that we do it is at our high school. So as they come through the door, metal detectors, they can get their breakfast, but we run them through traditional lines to grab and go. So they have to put in PIN numbers. We're utilizing our POS systems at our high schools because we continuously serve breakfast, and we use reimbursable vending machines, which require them to put in a PIN number, and they all talk to each other. So we're using the POS systems in our high schools where they have extended meal service and they can go from point to point to point. Otherwise, we would have no control over that.
Great, thank you so much. Well, that is all we have time for today. Thank you again so much for joining us on today's webinar. For those of you attending SNA in Denver, please stop by the FRAC booth in the partner pavilion. Say hi in person. I would love to meet you. I will also be presenting a CEP session with USDA and New Bedford School District on Sunday, July 9th at 10:30 a.m. The Redlands team is presenting on Breakfast After the Bell at 1 p.m. that same day, and we hope to see you there. Thank you to our fabulous speakers and presenters, and have a great day.